You're not going to make it very far if you think there's only one way to communicate.
Welcome back to Neuroconversing Leadership, where we help you connect with people who think, work, and see the world differently. I'm Jeremy Doran, and I love to help people transition from individual contributor into manager, from manager into executive, and help anyone who's leading cross-functional teams figure out how to communicate with everybody. Today, we have a very fun guest, Sarah Desimone. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Can you tell everyone a little bit about what your company does and what your role is?
So my company is a private environmental and engineering consulting firm. We do pretty much everything and anything. It's a lot of fun, but I work in the IT department. So I support all of our engineers and scientists as they go out into the field with software administration and access to whatever products they need to do their job well.
Great. And how did you get into that? Is that something that you went to school for, or was there a transition somewhere along the way?
Oh, absolutely not. I was a basic biology major, and I worked at the sewer department. Don't recommend that. I became a book editor, and then I went from there to environmental scientist at this company, and that was interesting because they chose me out of the applicants because I was a biology major and I could write, which is apparently something that is lacking in some engineers. So they were very excited to have me, and I became an environmental scientist. And then along the way, I started managing data, environmental data, and I moved into a space where I was doing so much managing of the data and software platforms that the CIO adopted me, and now I am a IT professional.
Congratulations on the adoption.
Thank you.
And I'll challenge the simple biologist. I don't think that's an actual thing.
Well, basic bio. So I wasn't environmental bio. It wasn't cell biology. It was just bachelor's in biology. So.
It's interesting. You talked about having the science background and also being able to write. And clearly that is not a typical thing. I went to school for mechanical engineering, and my junior year I took writing for engineers. And it was a bunch of people who the teacher loved me because I kind of accessed both sides of my brain and I could write, but it was really a struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun being a book editor.
Was it for technical books or?
It was for everything. I did everything from Christian poetry to math textbooks with, right on the cusp of a book with a CD attached where it had actual coding lines in it. And so, yeah, I've done everything.
Yeah, that's quite a wide range. Going back to your role when you were an environmental scientist, is that right? How much were you interacting with people outside of your organization?
Fairly regularly, yeah. I would be a point of contact for many of our clients.
And the clients were whom?
They would be, I did phase one environmental site assessments. So our clients were business owners who were trying to buy or sell commercial property. And the bank requires a phase one environmental site assessment for that process. So it was a part of the due diligence of buying and selling property.
Got it. And when you were interacting with business owners, tell me a little bit about what you needed from them, what they needed from you, and how those interactions went.
I would say pretty quickly I learned that they wanted the plain facts. So it was very easy to say, this is the list of things I need, very bullet pointed type of communication. In return, I know that they appreciated the clarity of procedure. So I would say, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. And I found that to be a really great way to build rapport, and it opened up, a nice line of communication where they were comfortable questioning whatever they had questions on. But it also allowed me to kind of walk in, because they weren't uncomfortable with me walking into their building cold. They knew it was coming. Um, so there was a lot of that repertory stuff that made
Nice.
people very comfortable.
So just letting them know exactly what's going to happen, when, and kind of how is what
Mm-hmm.
made it easier. I like it.
Absolutely.
And then how much of your report did you explain to them, and how much of it was just needed to get sent to the lender?
Well, I guess the only thing I really focused on was what I was looking for in the site reconnaissance. I was looking for anything that would impact soil or groundwater on the site, and that pretty much covered anything that we would need to talk about. Um, sometimes that would get a little hazy. Sometimes I would have kind of old timers who wouldn't think that dumping oil into the backyard impacted anything, because that's what they were told to do in the 80s, right? So there was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of, oh, we didn't want to get rid of the asbestos, so we just stored it in the boiler room. Silly stuff like that. That's funny, years later. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I just found it pretty straightforward, just to be clear. And the point of an environmental site assessment is for our consulting company to provide an opinion to the lender, if anything would impact soil or groundwater on the site. So
You say that it's funny years later, and there's a saying that comedy equals tragedy plus time.
yes.
Sometimes you have the distance to look back, and it makes it okay.
Yes.
And I worked at Pratt and Whitney back in the early 90s, where the amount of pollution that they had put into the ground and had just kind of closed their eyes to was astounding.
Hmm.
And you work with a lot of project managers there. Have you heard stories about their issues communicating with all the different players in the projects that your company works on?
Oh, sure. There's always a lot of playing politics. There's larger utility companies that wield a lot of power, that there's, working with government entities that have certain special rules. There's, people who, commercial owners who, have built their small empire and think they own the world. There's a lot of personality. I don't want to say conflicts, because that's not the right word, but there's a lot of consideration for what people believe that they deserve, or they believe what is in the scope of the project when it might actually not be. So, I mean, my company definitely has been successful in knowing when to give that latitude and when to not, when to point to the scope and say, nope, we can't cover this, or say, yeah, we know it's not technically part of scope, but we'll finesse this into it. I think that makes my company very human uh, in its approach to projects, and I think that's why we're a successful company.
I love it. The last two articles that I wrote were about um, really understanding the goals and the criteria for success, and then about how to prevent scope creep,
Mm.
because it happens so frequently. Can you tell me how often you're looking back at the scope document to make decisions about if you add a new thing or not?
In terms of internal projects, scope creep is absolutely terrible, because it's all internal. Because when you're working with your coworkers, you want to make sure that they can do their job as quickly and as efficiently as possible. You want to set them up for success. So, and when you're in IT, that definitely, we're constantly pushing ourselves to, do more with so much less, and raising the bar and delivering, so our engineers and scientists can go do their jobs as smoothly as possible. So we are absolutely guilty of terrible, terrible scope creep. But it's for the love of our coworkers, really, and the success of the company. So, which is different than scope creep in the company is losing money because they're providing services for clients that they aren't paying for. So different. I don't have any real experience with client scope creep.
Yeah, internal scope creep is just fine. And you get the added challenge of you really like these people and you want to help them and get them what they need.
Absolutely. And their success, provides my paycheck as well. So there's that.
It's interesting. One thing that I've noticed is IT is a great example. Very often, when a new project kicks off, the people who will actually use the software or the program are almost the last ones to be involved. Have you guys found a good way to involve the end user right up front?
I think I would say the opposite. IT is the last one to know. And so we swoop in and we have to figure out licensing, and we have to figure out how and if we're going to purchase this, because our frontline, project managers and engineers and scientists, are like, yep, we can do that. Yep, we can do that. Oh, I heard about this great, I'm part of this professional organization and they use this product and we could totally use that product. So they promise that to the client, or they imply it to the client, and then IT is on the back end going, what? So there is a lot of that. So to combat that, over the past couple of years, definitely there has been a really coordinated push to educate, to help people understand the implications of, you can't, it's not a personal laptop, it's not a personal project of your own. You're part of a larger ecosystem. And so when you consider purchasing a software, it affects all of these other people, all of these other budgets. And it also confuses our internal portfolio of software platforms, because all of these things need to be managed, all of these things need to be configured. A lot of it's education, a lot of it is, you've got to say no at some point. Um, for a company as old as ours, there is a little bit of growing pains from that, because we came from a place where we were very isolated in our offices, and each office kind of did their own thing. And now we're growing into a company that's large enough that we need overarching infrastructure. And so that change from, we're calling it the Wild West. So that change from the Wild West to a more structured IT, corporate, top down approach is definitely comes with its own growing pains.
It does. I've worked at companies that were the Wild West, and it was great because you could get just about anything done. You just had to know the right person to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got big enough where that does not work anymore. And they clamped all the way down on it, and everything had a process. And then nothing was really getting done because the processes were so cumbersome. And then it opens up a little bit and it tends to go back and forth as you go, like a pendulum.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we're still working out that balance, because we're a fiercely, each person is a fiercely independent person. They wouldn't get hired otherwise. So there is definitely a tension balance that we're working through. It's fun and it's great, but yeah, definitely.
You have the added challenge of being so spread out. You have how many offices?
33 offices. We are from all throughout New England, all the way out to New Mexico.
And how often are people getting together to meet face to face, and how often is it just phone calls and Zoom?
We use Teams, and that we're constantly on the phone with Teams. I've spent many 7-hour days on the just meetings. So we definitely prioritize the face to face. Everyone has their camera on if it's possible, um, and that's part of our culture is to add as much visual nonverbal communication as possible. Very much encouraging that. There's only a few outliers who don't want to do that, but for the most part, from the top down, all of our corporate um, officers are always on camera. Um, it's very open door policy. I can call anyone. I can call the CEO and he will pick up. It's great. So that's that's a real plus for us. Um, in terms of being in person, it's very difficult to do that. Obviously, we
Mhm.
have a yearly internal conference that is basically my favorite day of the year. But there's about 800 of us, and we get about 400 of us under one roof, and we squawk about all the great things that we're doing and all of our favorite projects. There's awards and recognition, and there's a big party at the end. So that's I think that's a real plus for this company, and I encourage everyone to go.
Nice. With 800 people, the fact that the CEO will answer a phone call is pretty astounding.
Yeah, or an email. I'll get a response to my email in 24 hours, or our standard response time.
That's great.
Mm.
And Zoom or Teams or whatever people use is an amazing step for working remotely because you can see faces. It's still not the same as being in person because most people like me, when we're on Zoom, our hands are on the table. So we're not making hand gestures and you can't see what the rest of our body is doing. You can see the face, which is a great start, but there's still things that get missed.
Yeah, I do find that there's less spontaneity, but then there is the space for a little more personal connection. If I'm calling my counterpart she's in New York and I'm in New Hampshire, if I call her and we talk about business, but then it's just the two of us in a meeting and I can just start talking about more rapport building things. And that's how we would build our rapport. So there is opportunities there that are a little bit more private for like one-on-one building rapport. But yes, absolutely. When I started here, I learned my job by walking around the office and poking my head into people's offices and saying, "Hi, what are you doing? I'm bored. What's up with you?" Um, and so that was how I got to know everybody. And I'll say, when COVID hit and we all went home, um, they called me. The company, as a program, called me to make sure I was doing okay during COVID and if I had any trouble doing my job. And I had to say, you know, I had been at this company for 5 years. So I said, I know my job, so I can do it. But if I had just started, like, I would make sure you're checking in with your 6 month employees because I could not do my job if I was sent home for COVID 6 months into this. I wouldn't know the person to call, right? So, but because I did know, I could be on Teams all the time, calling people and poking people and, keeping up those relationships. Um, but starting those relationships on Teams is definitely a difficult piece.
So, what did the people who had recently started do? How did they kind of simulate what you were able to do?
I don't know if they did. We were part of the great resignation during COVID. We had I think the last count was like 100-person turnover.
Ooh,
So yeah, I don't know if we were successful in supporting those people, or maybe that was exactly what was supposed to happen, where the people who were really not a great fit got to move on and do something different and better.
I like the spin of yes, the people who didn't belong were the ones who left.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We feel like the pandemic's over, but the ripple effects are still there. Kids who were in kindergarten and first grade are never going to be quite the same as other kids who got to be in person for those years.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's 'cause I don't have kids, so I don't interact with children very often, but it just seems to me that there just needs to be more opportunities for younger people to be together in unstructured spaces. And our society has taken away all those third party spaces. You can't hang out at the mall anymore because for some reason somebody got into trouble, and now like there are signs at my mall that says you can't be standing four or more people. You can't loiter. That we've somehow structured our lives, and somehow not trusted our children anymore. And I just think that's going to get worse until it breaks and we figure out our way back to how to be a community again, and instead of individual cogs in a machine.
It's almost like the pendulum that businesses go through when it's the Wild West to it's overly structured and then eventually they find a happy medium.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, me too. So going back to scope creep, because we need to start wrapping up, are there things that you have implemented that have helped reduce it, at least to some degree?
Mostly writing everything down. If it's written, then it's visual. Everyone can point to it. It's no longer out in the ether. Um, I'll even give a thumbs up to the recordings, Teams recordings. Copilot does a great job of pulling out the salient points of a meeting, even if you wander around and go on all these tangents. Um, but it does a great job of pulling out action items for each person. So that is a useful piece. Uh, Again, like project plans and PowerPoints and things where project managers have written down the process. Um, and that's useful for both internal and external uh, projects and clients.
I love using the Copilot for transcripts because everyone learns and remembers differently. Like people with ADHD, you can tell them something, but if you don't hand them a written copy of it, they're probably going to forget it. So that is a great tool to be able to use with people. As we wrap up, if there's one piece of communication advice you think everyone can benefit from, what would that be?
I think the most important thing about understanding communication is to know that the way that you understand messages is not the same as the person next to you. There are so many different ways to communicate but then also receive messages. So you think you're saying one thing, and what is received will be a completely unintended um, result. And I think if you are practicing your communication, there's a lot to be said for using different mediums, whether it's verbal and it's visual and it's written, asking for a response to make sure that your message is received properly, and knowing that there are people with ADHD, with dyslexia, with depression, things that affect memory and affect their ability to take in information and turn it into something useful. Um, just an acknowledgement that there's so much diversity there, and understanding how other people communicate and receive information definitely makes you're not going to make it very far if you think there's only one way to communicate.
Perfect. It sounds like you are taking everything that I think and putting it into a concise thought. So thank you for sharing that. All right, Sarah, thank you so much. It's been great having you on.
I'm glad I could be here. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening. If today's conversation resonated with you, share this episode with one person on your team who might benefit from it. And if you're leading a technical team and want to explore how these communication principles could work in your organization, visit www.neuroconversantleadership.com to learn more. And there you can reach out to schedule an appointment. I'd be happy to talk through what might be going on in your world. See you next week.